Labas rytas, mėly konferencijos.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to see so many of you both present here and watching us online. This is now the 13th International Scientific Practical Conference on Changes in Public Governance, focused on data-driven and AI-enabled public governance. As every conference, we are geared towards global changes, focusing on scientific, practical recommendations in order to find the solutions for the public governance sector to be more effective. We will be focusing on the latest trends in the field, best practices, and opportunities for building a space for scientists to share their experiences and challenges they face. My name is Professor Dr. Andrius Stasiukynas. Together with my colleague, Associate Professor Dr. Vidmantė Giedraitytė, will be moderating this first session. The conference in general is divided in several parts, beginning with the plenary session where foreign analysts will be focusing on the public governance trends. This will be followed by a discussion involving Seimas, municipal government representatives. We will then have a 1-hour break at 1 p.m., which will be followed by two panels. Panel A, focusing on digital transformation and artificial intelligence in public governance, international practices and innovations, where our experts, foreign experts, will be focusing on foreign practices and focused on different challenges, resilience aspects, and so on. This panel will take place at room 218B, building 3 of the Parliament. The majority of keynote speakers will be joining us online in this panel. As for the second panel, Panel B, this panel will take place in this Constitution Hall, where we'll be focusing on data-driven and AI-enabled public sector in Lithuania, resilience, democracy, and decision quality. Here we will be focusing on AI and other security-related matters in the national security context. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the organizers. This conference is organized with the Excellence Network of Public Governance in cooperation with the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, the Ministry of the Interior of Lithuania, the Faculty of Public Governance and Business of Mykolas Romeris University, General Jonas Žemaitis Military Academy of Lithuania, and my particular gratitude goes to Ms. Vilma Keidūnė and the Committee on State Administration and Local Authorities she's working for. So thank you to all of you for enabling us this smooth organization of this event. And with that, I would like to now pass the floor to my colleague, Ms. Giedraitytė. Ladies and gentlemen, as Andrius has mentioned, this is the 13th annual conference where we once again meet to focus on scientific, practical issues on public governance. Today's topic is really relevant because current technologies and AI are of particular importance in all the fields of public governance, which means that we have to focus not only on innovation and technological solutions and their way of contributing to ensuring greater effectiveness in public sector, but also on responsible use of the technologies and their ethical use. So we're looking forward to hearing some insights and solutions to those issues that we will hopefully discover in our today's discussions. And to begin our today's conference, I would now like to give the floor for his welcome address that is Mr. Jaroslav Narkevich, Chair of the Committee on State Administration and Local Authorities of the Seimas.
Ačiū labai už aplodismentus. Tai yra gera pradžia mūsų.
Thank you very much. This marks the beginning of our wonderful work for today. It's a pleasure to welcome this conference. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professors, for your introduction. Your moderation, I believe, will contribute to today's event and finding our solutions to the current challenges that emerge in our modern lives. On behalf of the Committee on State Administration and Local Authorities, I would like to welcome the organizers and partners, civil servants, members of the academia, and all of you present here, as well as those watching us online, joining on this at this conference. I would also like to take this opportunity and welcome Ms. Daiva Žebelienė, Deputy Speaker of the Seimas, joining us today as well. Who, before assuming this role, was also the chair of the committee that I currently preside over. So I hope that our joint efforts will be a valuable contribution today. As for today's conference, you will be listening to the keynote speakers from different foreign states, different stakeholder institutions, as well as colleagues from Ukraine. And their effort is of utmost importance for us because they are making their efforts in the most difficult of conditions. We appreciate that this conference has already become an annual event, joining the representatives of public policy and other public governance fields, and hopefully that through dialogue we will be able to not only share practical experience but also find ways how to systemize AI-enabled solutions that are used in public governance nowadays. This is the main challenge for us, mobilizing us here today. Certainly, AI used to be something that was hard to imagine, while today it has become part and parcel of our daily lives, something that enables us to elaborate on our ways to ensure more effective public governance. However, at the same time, it comes with certain risks. Within our committee, we are looking into the use of AI, and we observe that it is important to ensure systemic use of AI in public governance field so that we could achieve joint results set for this sector and at the same time address the challenges presented by AI. In other words, dear experts, policy makers, representatives of the academia, I wish you successful and fruitful work in today's event, because the results that you will reap today is something that all of us eagerly await, as well as other people, because it is the people that we are mainly developing the AI-enabled technologies for. With that, I would also like to thank the staff of the Committee on State Administration and Local Authorities who mainly contributed to the organization of today's event. So on behalf of our colleagues of the committee, I now officially announce our 13th conference opened. All the best to you today. Thank you.
Ačiū pirmininkė už gražius žodžius.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your kind words and best wishes. And with that, let us begin our plenary session. To deliver the first presentation, we will give the floor to Professor Dr. David Schultz, representing Hamline University, US. He is also an affiliate professor with the General Jonas Žemaitis Military Academy of Lithuania. Today's presentation by Professor Schultz is titled Governing the Machine That Governs Us, Artificial Intelligence, Democracy, and the Future of the State. Professor Schultz is a political analyst at the US and legal expert whose work is focused on public governance and administration, democracy governance in the US. Unfortunately, today, Professor Schultz was unable to attend this event, be it in person or remotely, because right now, as we are having this event, he is over the Atlantic flying to another conference. That is why he sent us his video address that we'll be sharing with you today.
Labą dieną to all of you. Thank you very much for allowing me to be able to participate in this conference. I wish I could be in person today, but as this conference is taking place, I am flying to Bulgaria to participate in a World Press Institute conference where we're going to be discussing the threats to press freedom across the world. But thank you very much for allowing me to participate today. My name is David Schultz, and I'm a professor of political science and legal studies at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I'm also a professor affiliated with your military academy. And the title of my talk today is called Governing the Machine That Governs Us: Artificial Intelligence, Democracy, and the Future of the State. If we think about it, the use of artificial intelligence, as I'll make my point again later on, the use of artificial intelligence in governance is not a question of if, but a question of when and how. And think about it, that across the world, there are already many friendly countries that are using AI. There are adversaries that are using artificial intelligence. And unfortunately, there will be those who are criminals or those who seek to do bad things who will also be using AI. The challenge that I'm going to argue is how. How can governments, democratic governments like Lithuania's, use artificial intelligence in an appropriate way to further democratic goals and democratic governance, while at the same time avoiding some of the problems that AI will bring with it. So what I want to do in my brief amount of time today is to really set up a few different things. One is to talk about sort of the duality in terms of how AI can be used, again, for furthering democratic governance, along with providing some examples from across the world, and also the threats that it poses to democratic governance, again, with some examples, and then leading us to eventually a point where I can maybe come up with 4 or 5 criteria that we need to think about when using artificial intelligence in the future. Just to let you know, I've been thinking a lot about AI for the last few years. When it first burst on the scene a few years ago, I was one of the first professors at my university and one of the first in the country to say that we can't stick our heads in the sand, we can't deny its existence. We have to figure out how to use it and use it appropriately. And additionally, I've written several articles already about AI in terms of how artificial intelligence will enhance the capacity to commit, unfortunately, current crimes, as well as perhaps generate new crimes, and what role AI might have in terms of perhaps, unfortunately, transforming concepts such as genocide or aggression or war in a variety of different ways. I just mentioned all this because I've been thinking very much about it. And in my classes in the United States, I've also thought very much about what role AI has in terms of furthering democratic goals or good government. But if we think about it also, artificial intelligence is only the latest information technology that people feared would undermine democracy and government. And the reality is that AI is probably doing both. It has both undermined it and also has the capacity to transform a democracy. But if we think about some of the other information technologies over time that have been viewed as both threats and as something good, think about if we go way back in time to when Gutenberg developed the printing press. For many, the printing press was feared as raising the specter of heresy, that it would make the widespread dissemination of books and ideas a threat perhaps to Christianity, a threat to orthodox ideas in the world. I remember once reading somebody who's also argued and said, not only did Gutenberg Press make possible the widespread publication of books, but it also made possible then the widespread burning of books. True. How about other technologies? Radio was introduced in the 1920s and 1930s, again, used for both good and for bad. Radio became the way for citizens across the world to be able to gather information nearly instantaneously for a variety of things. In the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt used radio effectively in what was called his fireside chats to reassure Americans during the Great Depression that they had nothing to fear but fear themselves. But conversely, Adolf Hitler became the master of radio. But also, at the same time that radio emerges, we also have the rise almost simultaneously of movies, of film. And again, films can enlighten, can provide important information, but in the hands of the Nazi propagandists such as Goebbels, films such as The Triumph of the Will became propaganda. And then television was yet another technology that had this dual capacity, seen both as making it possible to transmit information across the world and to citizens, but at the same time to perhaps trivialize or sensationalize the news. And then from there, we can, of course, talk about things such as what? The internet, where people at one point envisioned that the internet and eventually the social media would have the capacity to create the digital democracies, to give people the capacity to be able to gather information, to be able to deliberate in ways that was never possible for democracy. But unfortunately, we also know that the internet, that the social media has produced what? A rapid expansion of disinformation, misinformation, has put people into media bubbles, and has in some cases spread polarization and populism across the world in ways that have been very destructive. The whole point of mentioning this is AI is yet another one of these technologies. Well, in thinking about where AI fits in to this broader debate about technology and information in a democracy, we really have to think about some real classic dilemmas that have been out there for a couple of thousand years, if not longer. The first one is what's called the technocracy versus democracy debate. And maybe this goes back as long as Plato and the ancient Greeks. It is the idea that Plato said that knowledge should rule, that the wisest, the smartest should be those who are in command. And it places in opposition to democracy the idea that the people get to rule. It says that maybe that only those who are the smartest, those who, for our purposes, who have mastered technology, who understand the complexities of governance, and with it, the technologies that are used to govern, could be the ones or should be the ones who govern. But of course, this technology has the capacity to be able to not just produce democracy, but undermine it. To basically say that it is the technocrats, not the people who rule. That it is to basically say that we are going to put emphasis more upon expertise as opposed to people. Now, that's the classic technocracy versus democracy issue. I frame it as an opposition, but hopefully we can figure out a way of bridging that opposition to say, can we come up with a way to democratically govern or use technology? A second issue that goes back hundreds of years is the facts versus values. When it comes to policymaking, and I have talked about this for most of my career in teaching, I believe in fact-based or evidence-based policy, that we should make policy based upon the best data and evidence we have at hand, even if sometimes we don't have all the information that we need. But on the other hand, policy is also about values, basic choices that are ethical, about right and wrong, about trade-offs we make on a whole bunch of different types of issues, whether it's on taxes, healthcare policy, discrimination policy, human rights, whatever. How do we bridge? How do we say in democratic governance, we want new technologies that make it possible to have greater access to information, but at the same time, preserve and respect the role of values in democratic governance? The basic bottom line, technocracy versus democracy, it is facts versus values. It is trying to bridge these issues. The choice before every parliament and every government today then is no longer whether to use AI in governance as I open this presentation. It is how, on whose terms, and with what safeguards. Lithuania grasped this early on. Its parliament's future committee established an AI working group in late 2023, and now it has an action plan promoting AI innovation across all government sectors. The question now before this chamber is not whether to engage, Lithuania already has, but how to lead responsibly and what principles should guide that leadership. Similar in the United States, we're having debates. Should we let AI be largely unregulated and let it do what it wants to do or how it's going to operate, which is the position of the Trump administration, or is AI being used subject to regulation? Should individual states in the United States like New York or California have an ability to be able to regulate it? Should there be limits placed on its capacity or use for military issues? These are all questions that are being brought up. Now, what are the promises that AI can genuinely deliver for democratic governance? For example, it could be what I would call radical efficiency in public services. Estonia, for example, is using automated AI systems to process tax returns for almost all of its citizens in just a matter of minutes. It dramatically reduces bureaucracy and improving service. Estonia is also seeking to integrate AI into over 50 AI applications across public services, from citizens-facing chatbots to back-office administrative work. The idea would be that citizens will spend less time navigating bureaucracy, have more time for everything else: work, family, participation. Efficiency in terms of good service is not simply a technocratic issue, it's an important democratic value. Yes, we should be thinking about how good government is an efficient government in part. Among the other things that AI can do well is it can do incredible amounts of analysis with large data. It can take large data sets, public expenditures, infrastructure, traffic patterns, health outcomes, educational attainment, agricultural patterns, take a lot of data and analyze trends. In Estonia, for example, AI analyzes emergency calls in real time, collects live data on traffic accidents, and runs predictive models to project or reduce road casualties. It has also been using Estonia satellite imagery combined with AI to detect whether farmers are complying with subsidy regulations. Estonia also uses it in its unemployment insurance fund, uses AI to predict long-term unemployment risks for individuals. It could be used in legislative and regulatory support. It can be used to assist parliaments to identify redundancies and contradictions in existing law, flagging unintended consequences in proposed legislation. It can be used for what? Efficient drafting. Political actors are already using AI to help draft ballot initiatives, gather petition signatures, and develop detailed policy proposals across the world. It can be used, AI, to enhance public safety. It can be used to analyze digital evidence. It can look at patterns in terms of financial fraud or money laundering. It can be used for early detection of cybersecurity vulnerabilities in national infrastructures. For Lithuania, a NATO frontline state with significant national security concerns, AI has the capacity to identify and respond to threats in digital systems. We can also use AI for social services and predictive welfare, trying to predict risks related to housing, food insecurity, addiction, mental health, perhaps maybe even the next pandemic. All of this can be using AI for positive purposes. On the other hand, there are threats. We all know the story about AI hallucinating, making up facts, making up court cases. This is legendary in the United States of lawyers turning in briefs using AI, and that AI turns out to have made up cases or come up with incorrect statutes or citations. Now, I suspect at some point AI is going to improve from its own learning and reduce those problems, but that is a problem. Second, AI has the capacity of creating algorithmic biases and discrimination on scales that we have never seen before. Think about how AI can be used for good policing purposes, but it could also be used for what? Racial profiling. It could be used for modeling and forecasting crime in ways that profiles people or individuals. We know in Chile, for example, they're using at least 117 algorithmic systems across a variety of public agencies to determine who receives public health care, who gets a seat in a public school, and so forth. It's doing so in ways that potentially discriminate and doing so in ways that look like it forecloses public debate. There's the accountability vacuum. By that, we already have complaints now by people that say that bureaucracies in administrative states are faceless and inhuman. What if now we have algorithms making more choices and acting? To what extent will people blame it on the algorithm did it, not taking personal responsibility? Or to what extent will the AI or algorithmic systems transform routine actions into, such as border checks and other action, into things that now become faceless and anonymous? Again, I think about the worst characteristics of government. It's when it's the faceless bureaucrat. Think about how countries like China already are using AI for authoritarian surveillance purposes, using it in ways to try to combine it with cameras and other tools to basically clamp down on democracy. There's the problem with AI of transparency, the black box problem, not understanding how choices are being made and not knowing who to hold responsible for those choices. Is it the government agent? Is it the legislator? The parliament member? Is it the programmer? Who's responsible? How does the use of AI erode democratic deliberation? I think in part what democracy is about is that interface of constituents or citizens with the government and their representatives. Take that away and make it an AI interface instead, or an algorithm. How might it lead to democratic erosion? Think also about how, in many countries of the world, and I think Lithuania is one of them, the problem of redistricting is an issue. On the one hand, redistricting or reapportionment can be done in a way with AI that's efficient and fair, but it could also be done in a way that hides the biases. And then finally, people are not oftentimes talking about the environmental and equity costs surrounding AI. We know that the data centers need enormous amounts of energy, and how is that going to challenge the grid? But at the same time, the equity issue of some people having access to AI and being able to employ it and others not. This again is the democracy-tenocracy issue. Thus, again, the question before every legislator, every parliament, is not whether to use AI, it's whether democracy will govern AI. And as we move forward, let's think about perhaps that there ought to be 5 values that instruct its use. First, AI should be seen as a tool, not as a decision maker. It should be used to facilitate decision making, to help gather information, but not replace human decision making. 2, AI needs to have transparency by design. The algorithmic systems used in government must be audible, must be explained in plain language to non-specialists, and open to parliamentary and public scrutiny. A citizen who is denied a benefit, flagged by a law enforcement system, or disadvantaged by a government algorithm has the right to human explanation and a meaningful path to appeal. 3, there needs to be equity auditing before and during deployment of AI to assess its impact on various ethnic groups in terms of perhaps also rich and poor, or however we want to think about it. There must be 4, democratic deliberation about AI itself. Parliaments must demonstrate they can be laboratories of democracy for AI governance, testing disclosure requirements, liability frameworks, and sector-specific regulatory measures. There needs to be open debate regarding how it's used. And then finally, there needs to be international cooperation rooted in shared democratic values regarding how AI will be used. The EU AI Act provides a framework, but that's only a framework. There needs to be more than just a framework, but there needs to be country-specific and perhaps each agency-specific open deliberation and discussion. As I close, AI is here. We're not going back. It is yet another information technology that both challenges and potentially enhances democratic governance. What we need to be thinking about is where this all fits in. Thus, the machine that governs us does not have to govern us, but ensuring that does not require exactly the same type of deliberate, courageous, democratic choices that are made in rooms like this. By that, what I mean to say is that if we in this room make the right choices, we can ensure that AI doesn't govern us, but we govern it, and it is used to serve democratic purposes. I wish I had more time to engage with you all, to answer your questions. I have lots more that I could say about ideas and suggestions for the use of AI, but let me stop here and say thank you very much. I hope to see you all again very soon.
Tai dėkojam gerbiamam profesoriui, gaila, kad neturime
Thank you, Professor. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to ask the questions, and we have a solid foundation for the conference. We talked about both about AI-driven progress and challenges, and the question is how to use it in a smart way. We thank the professor, and if you have any questions for the professor, professor asked us to inform you that you can send him emails, and he's looking forward to answer to your questions and discuss with you. And after the conference, you will be provided a compilation of summaries, which will include the email of Professor Schulz. And for the next presentation, I would like to invite Dr. Michael Street, who's the Chief of Data and Science Artificial Intelligence in NATO Communications and Information Agency. The topic of his presentation is AI on the battlefield, improving decision-making while retaining trust. Dr. Street, we have a question. Are you going to share your slides, or can we share your slides?
Side, and I'll talk around.
Puiku, puiku.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for this honour and invitation to speak to you today. Again, I'm also sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm currently attending a NATO conference addressing some of the challenges of adopting AI, where we're fortunate to have some very good contributions from Lithuanian colleagues. Next slide, please. I'll just give a little overview and an introduction to what we're doing in NATO with AI, just hopefully to give a little background and a bit of credibility to all the things that I'll then talk about around education and understanding of the technology, the challenges of computing infrastructure, the challenges of data, responsible use. Some of these are things which Professor Schulz has already addressed. But I'll go into a little more detail. Next slide, please. So just as a little introduction of where I'm coming from, I established the data science and AI team at NATO's IT agency about 8 years ago. Since then, we've grown from a very small group, well, from 2 people actually to begin with, to now around 20 or more data scientists and AI developers. We support the whole of the NATO enterprise, from the political headquarters in Brussels to the operational decision makers throughout Europe and beyond. We have right now about 20 active AI projects, ranging from some things which are very tangible, analysing data coming from the battlefield, to some linking to Dr. Schultz's comments about the AI generated information. We have a major project. One of NATO's first major AI projects was to track and understand media messages, to see how NATO messages were getting out to our populations, how they were being influenced and twisted for certain populations by adversarial actors. We have a team of AI developers, data scientists and data engineers who are active in building AI systems for use by NATO. We have a classified AI sandbox where we can work with secret data to build and train our models before we start to use them. And we work very closely with many nations, including Lithuania, also with industry and academia, to deliver these projects for our colleagues in NATO to make use of. Next slide, please. This slide is an extract from an academic paper from last year. which was looking at the impact of AI in how people perform tasks. If you wish to read the whole paper, the link is underneath. But just to quickly describe what you're seeing in the graph, on the left-hand side, the baseline is a single human doing a task on their own, and that's marked as 0. In the blue bar, it's the effectiveness of a single human doing their task with AI, as you can see, significantly more. In yellow, it's a group of people. Blue is a group of people. Yellow is an individual plus AI, and in red, a team of people plus AI. So this paper and this research showed that for the tasks that they selected, adding AI to one or more people makes them more productive. So I think, as Professor Schultz alluded to, the question isn't whether we're going to use AI or not. We are going to. It has many benefits. If I quote a UK general who was at an AI conference recently, he said, "Without AI on the battlefield, we will lose, and we can't afford to lose militarily. So we will use it. It will be adopted. The question is, how do we do it? How do we understand the challenges and the opportunities?" And if we go to the next slide, please. One of the challenges that we have in NATO, what we've noticed in NATO when we have a major advancement, is it takes a lot of things to line up. We usually need to change policy to allow us to do new things and to allow us to work in different ways. We need to change how we're structured to make use of the new technology. We need to make major investments. Currently, NATO has plans to spend something like €1 billion on AI-related projects in the next couple of years. We have an AI strategy that's just been updated. We're currently working on an AI policy to put a little more detail into the high-level vision. Also to look at some of the challenges, some of the old policies that are restricting our ability to use AI sensibly and effectively. We're looking at how we need to change our organizations, the kind of skills people need to have to work with AI effectively in the future. And one of the things that we developed from NCIA since 2003 was the concept of an AI masterclass, because we realized these are complex decisions around a technology which is often viewed as close to magic. We know that our senior decision makers are often being invited to receive very glossy presentations from very significant companies to dazzle them about the ability of AI and all of the problems it can solve if only we sign the check that to buy their product or their tooling. So the AI Masterclass was introduced to give our senior leaders in NATO and in allied nations some of the initial understanding, the initial awareness of what AI is and isn't, how it can work, where it can add value, where it won't ever. Some of the challenges of how to really realize the opportunities AI can bring, some of the vulnerabilities and the problems which the previous speaker alluded to. This masterclass is something which we deliver with colleagues from industry and academia, but it's all structured really to help the senior decision makers in NATO and in national defence organisations to understand the questions they need to ask before adopting AI, to have good, intelligent conversations, to be able to engage with their industry partners on an equal footing, so that it becomes a partnership between government or defence and industry, not a one-sided relationship. Next slide, please. One of the challenges that we have certainly in NATO and I think everywhere is computing infrastructure for AI. Within our team, about half of our projects work with unclassified data or public data, and these we're able to run in our NATO secure public cloud environment. But about half of our projects are not. They're working with much more sensitive data, which we can't put in the cloud at the moment. So there, we're responsible for our own on-premise computing infrastructure for AI. So this includes our AI sandbox, but also the AI execution elements as well. And we find here, when we work with our colleagues on the holistic solution here, we start off talking about AI and the desire to deploy AI algorithms and models. And we realize very quickly that we need to have GPUs, graphical processing units, of the type designed and built by NVIDIA and other companies. Typically, we haven't had many of those in our IT infrastructure. So we need new GPUs, and they come in new servers, which are the latest generation. They tend to require much more power to run these graphical processing units, to run the AI algorithms. So we need to change our racks to have, in many cases, 10 times the power supply in each of our racks in our data centers and our server rooms, which means we have to have different power supplies, significant increases in our power supply and our cooling in our server rooms. We need to redesign the rooms. In some cases, just the weight of our next generation of racks to run AI is too heavy for the floors in our existing server rooms. And then we have the challenge of power supply, of tangibly getting it into our server rooms, getting it into our premises. And here, where we're working with our local power companies in sites around NATO, often the answer from them is, yes, we understand your request to increase your electricity supply significantly, but every major organization is asking the same thing for their IT so that they can also run IT. The big IT providers and cloud providers are asking for huge increases to run their data centers. And the electric vehicle industry is looking for much more electricity supply to be able to support the rollout of electric vehicles. So there's a lot of demand on electricity. At a macro level, we see it actually on the next slide. So this is a chart just estimating the increase in power consumption, electricity consumption to run AI data centers. So expected to quadruple in the next 10 years, at a time when we may see other demands like electric vehicles also pushing for significant increases in the amount of electricity. So from a government level, this is something which needs to be addressed and understood. At our local level in NCIA, we're responsible for dealing with the data centers on our sites that we're responsible for and powering those at a small scale. But holistically, at a national level or a NATO level, these are challenges which are going to have an impact on how much AI we can roll out in the future and what some of the trade-offs will be between the demand from AI and the demand from other areas. Next slide, please. We need to have electricity and we need to have data. And we understand that data has varying qualities. It can exhibit bias. We have to be able to trust the data. And this diagram shows a little bit of some of the challenges and where we have problems which we need to dig into more in our data. Where we're collecting the data, understanding exactly what we collect and whether this and how this represents the ground truth of a situation. Then we need to collect that and start to analyze it and process it. And there we may have biases in terms of what we decide to keep and what we discard. We may have biases in what's being reported. There may be historical bias of things that weren't collected in the past, but should have been. Then as we prepare it, we will make a choice about what data we sample and how we sample it. That has an impact on the performance of the overall model. And it's something that we need to be aware of when we develop and train a model. And once we've trained the model on our training data, and then we start to use it, then we're taking, again, data from the real world, from our ground truth. We sample that, we infer with the AI model answers and recommendations. All of these stages, there's a translation and an abstraction from the real world into the data that we're choosing to operate, the data that we choose to use in our model. And we need to be very careful about what the implications of choices we make as we are in our team and in any AI team, how we're managing that data, how we're training the model, how we're reviewing the performance of the model, how we assess it, how often we go back and retrain and recheck, so that we understand the level of bias and how much we can trust the data. We also have to be aware, at least in a defence environment, and I think in political ones too, of the possibility of data poisoning. This is a comparatively new term, but the fact that our adversaries may be aware that we're using data to inform our decision makings, that if they understand what data we use and how we use it, they can manufacture just small amounts of data, inject that in the right places, and it may change the output of our models. So they may be able to manufacture to poison our data inputs in order to manipulate the outputs and the decisions that we will take at the end of our model. So it's a new risk and challenge to our AI systems. Next slide, please. To counter this and some of the other challenges, which again Professor Schultz alluded to, NATO introduced its 6 principles of responsible use in our AI strategy. This includes lawfulness, responsibility and accountability, explainability and traceability to get beyond the black box problem that was described earlier, reliability, governability, and bias mitigation. One of the things that we've been working on in our team and with colleagues across a number of nations is how do we take these high-level principles and translate them into tangible steps that we can do when we select on our data to train models, as we train and assess and deploy the models that we develop. Some of these steps are things that we can do during the development of AI. They're a problem for the AI developers. Some of them are a challenge for the users, which could be helped by education for the users, by close engagement, by, for example, one system that we've developed for our colleagues in NATO's Air Command. We came up with a model where we don't just show them the input and the output, but we also show them how those inputs fall into different categories, how we make decisions based on them, and how that leads to the output. So we give the users an insight into inside the black box so that they have a better understanding of how this system is running. And if they see something which feels wrong to them as the experts in the field, that they can then report on that and feed it back to us so that we can take account of it in a way that wouldn't be possible if we just give them an answer each time. So the principles of responsible use are something that NATO takes seriously. There are equivalents in many nations from the US and European nations, I think in the EU AI Act as well. So it's something which is being taken seriously and being translated into tangible, practical steps. Next slide, please. And this is an example of an AI dashboard that we developed in our team. So every project that we work on, we have a dashboard. Some of the inputs to this dashboard are automatically generated through our software development process. Some of them are the result of an assessment, often carried out by somebody outside the team, to look at how we're addressing the 6 principles of responsible use, the steps we've put in place to mitigate those. As it says on the slide, we do see it's useful, but we recognise that much more work is needed. And in fact, within NATO, there is a new initiative that's just starting to look again at the principles of responsible use, at the guidelines and the toolkits that have been developed in the previous years, and to update these to take on board the lessons that we've learned from the past few years of developing and deploying AI, but also the advances in AI as that continues on its dramatic development. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, some of our lessons learned and identified from using AI in NATO contexts, training models, deploying models, bringing in commercial tools and commercial models and making them available to people across NATO at scale, to do this while complying with our security needs, the stringent security needs. One of the things that we recognise is we need to have much more informed decision-making about AI at every level, about the policies of what we're aiming to get from AI, how we go about doing that, some of the precursors that we need to put in place, whether it's planning long-term things like pouring concrete to build new data centres so that we can fill them with the right servers and the right equipment in the future, but also things like changes to the policies, a holistic approach to policy, where, in fact, in NATO headquarters, our colleagues there have put down one of the first things they do as they write the new AI policy for NATO is to look at all of the other policies that might impact it and see which ones are going to be beneficial, which ones need to be updated elsewhere. So, for example, security policy, things like that. We need to have a holistic approach to where we make our investments, whether we're just buying flashy tools from major companies, whether we're developing things ourselves, whether we have something in the middle, where we can make sure that we're spending our taxpayers' euros effectively and sensibly. We need to look at what skills we need for the future. How do we train and start to recruit the staff that we need to be able to make use of these AI tools? One of the things that we've realised is it sounds a little obvious, but it's easy to overlook, is everything starts with data. If we don't have that good quality data where we understand the biases that might exist, where we understand how to track it, how to manage it, if we don't have those data sources to train good models on, then the output from our AI models will not give us the benefits that we're looking for. And sometimes, for example, the project that we did with NATO's Air Command, we actually began with, for 2 years, we just looked at the data of bringing more data in, making it more accessible, more visible, combining the data sources in different ways, giving the operators time to look at that data as it was consolidated, make judgments about it, add their expertise, and actually that already gave them almost everything they were looking for. It was only after 2 years that a later stage in the project, we then took that 2 years worth of really good quality data. We were able to train a small, very efficient AI model on it, and then add that to the system to add an extra layer of functionality. But if we're not thinking about the data from the start, where we get it from, which systems we have, whether we need to buy it from industry, whether we need to collect it from the internet, system changes that we need to make on our own IT systems. If we don't think about where the data is for our AI system in the future, we're almost bound to fail with our AI project in that case. We need to ensure that we apply AI responsibly, that we understand the challenges that it might pose, we understand how it may be used, as well as how we want it to be used. We may talk about meaningful human control, but if we end up with a system, an AI system that makes a recommendation and humans are just going to blindly click the box and accept, that's not really meaningful control. It's not really the AI being used responsibly with close control from our human operators. And we also need to think about some of the challenges you may have seen in the news in recent weeks about a company which had all of their data wiped because an AI agent made some changes to the software and then deleted all of their backups. So the potential is, it has the potential to do great things, but it has potential to do a lot of harm very quickly that can take a lot of time to recover. It's one thing if it hits the profits of a company or perhaps destroys the profits of a company. It's another if it destroys trust of our civilian populations in defence, in our defence and our military, or in any branch of government. We come back to the challenges which Professor Schultz was alluding to. But finally, we also want to enjoy the benefits with going into these decisions with our eyes open, being able to make major investments but also major change. Understanding the guardrails we need to put in place to make sure the responsibility is there, but that should lead to us being able to enjoy the benefits of making decisions based on huge quantities of data that we couldn't deal with as humans, being able to speed up the development of documents or the summarization of huge quantities of media data. There are a lot of benefits that are out there to be enjoyed, and we should be focusing on those, but also understand, again, with our eyes open, how will we measure those benefits? How will we make sure that we really get the expected outputs that we're looking for? And with that, if we move to the next slide, I would just like to say once again, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to share a little bit of our experience from a NATO perspective of how we have adopted, developed and deployed AI in the past couple of years. I'm happy to take any questions now if there are any, or also to have them received by email or after the event. Thank you.
Labai dėkojame.
Thank you for the presentations. Colleagues, are there any questions? Yes, I can see someone raising a hand.
To thank you, first of all, for your wonderful and interesting insights on artificial intelligence in defense and security. Let me ask one question. You mentioned the importance of data availability to use artificial intelligence, but in your speech you mentioned that sources might differ. It might be public sources, but at the same time it might be private sector owned sources. I would like to ask about transparency and accessibility of such a data, and which sources, public or private, you prefer in defense issues. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. Within all of our projects, we take data from three sources, really. There's one, public data that we collect ourselves. As an example, we had a project recently to support the NATO chief scientist on his technology trends predictions. Historically, this is an activity that gets done by experts, typically distinguished professors from across the alliance are asked to give their thoughts on where their particular field goes. Recently, we added an AI tool to this, where we pulled in the publicly published research on science and technology from the last 10 years. We analysed the content of it, and we used that to help add some data of how much public research was being published in particular areas, how fast it was moving, where the direction was going. In this, we were able to pull public information which is published openly on the internet by the academic community. It's work for us to find the locations, to scrape the data, to then process it before we can analyse it. But in that case, we're in control of the whole data collection cycle, if you will. As another example, I mentioned the media analysis project. There, we do some public scraping of data, but actually there are a lot of companies that do this professionally, and they will look at hundreds of media sources from Reuters, the BBC, CNN, hundreds of media sources in many, many languages all around the world. And their business model is they scrape that data, they find that data, they scrape it, they do some quality checks and some consolidation first, and then they sell access to that data as a service. If we understand what they're doing and we trust their process, that they don't add a bias to their data collection, then it can be effective, more cost effective to pay them for that service than it is for us to do that data collection ourselves. But we have to recognise that now there's a commercial body in between us and that raw data. And the third source of data is data which is coming from our own internal systems. So this tends to be the more classified data about missile launches or command and control things. There, generally we have a lot more confidence in the data that's coming in because it's coming from systems that operate in a classified environment where the people who are generating those reports are on our network, the people who are validating the reports are on our network. It's still not infallible. And often the people who are generating or checking the reports are exceptionally busy. They may not have been sufficiently trained to label the data or add the right fields to it. So in all of these three sources, public data, commercially available data, or our own internal data, we still need to understand the provenance of the data and how that might impact what we want to do with it. And then, of course, in some areas such as intelligence, we are combining many of these things together. So we're combining our very sensitive intelligence from military intel systems with open source intelligence that we may get from news reports or things like that. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Ar dar turime kokį trumpą?
Are there any more questions? We are running out of time, but this is a great opportunity to ask a question. Professor still has indicated his email. Thank you once again, Professor.
Okay, thank you.
Ir norėčiau
I would like to give the floor for Professor Dr. Marius Laurinaitis from Mykolas Romeris University. Professor is an expert on financial technologies. He's working with AI influence on security and our information space, and he's going to talk about formal transparency or substantive openness, the dilemma of opening municipal decision-making data in the age of artificial intelligence.
prašom.
Labas rytas, laba diena, ačiū. Gerai, kad teisinė matematika.
Good morning. The presentations that we've already heard were very interesting, and I have a cognitive debt, which is a new term in our institution, and certain activities will be transferred onto systems. And the best example, you don't ever argue with a calculator, so you don't argue with language models. We should thank Nokia company and T9 algorithm, and it was the beginning that we can work with language in a good way. And the legal basis of the European Union has been changed. We use functional equivalence.
Sistemos teksto prieiga ribota.
In 2019, we've changed our legal regulation regarding concessions. We've opened the way for reaching all different forms of sources, but not for commercial purposes, rather for scientific purposes. That's where a certain issue was coded, that we have to strike some kind of profit. So now we can access the corpus. Those who can access the corpus, they in a way commercialize the outcome of their efforts. So, in other words, there are many deriving issues. Back in 2020, the EU has also tried to deem AI as a legal subject. Luckily, they were reasonable enough not to do it, to admit that AI can be equal to a human being, because that's way too early to do that. And today I will be focused on different agents. I've been using Claude and other models. Whenever I use them, I'm always informed by Claude that I should use more visuals in our presentation, although I never do that, but he always assists me in that, imposes on doing that, and I always insist that he wouldn't interpret too much, but he constantly insists that I would use visuals in my presentations. So I will try to give you some examples showing that AI models they use data as a currency. It is very important to use our homework before we launch our project, and so we did. So our models, they have different algorithms depending on the different linguistic varieties, but it is up to the data that we uploaded to it. And there are still systems that are unavailable for data. Our legal acts, as you may know, are publicly available. If you were to ask me the total number of them available, you wouldn't be able to say the figure. Maybe somebody from the Seimas office would tell you that there are hundreds of thousands of valid legal acts, and people would definitely be unable to be aware of all of them, but we have technologies that make this knowledge possible. As for the data available within municipalities, we must make use of the necessary tools to access all that data, because the technology is becoming cheaper. For example, control is in general is based on ex ante regulation. Anything that happens ex post means that there is no initial control. If people miss something that is related to control, fixing those mistakes at a later stage might take years. For instance, a number of different judicial decisions are adopted, repealing previous decisions that were adopted 2 to 3 years ago. Very often, this is related to certain imperative rules. That is, the decision was adopted in violation of certain norms. Yet those decisions are taken, and in order to repeal those decisions, it takes up to 2 to 3 years. So if an algorithm gives you a conclusion that such a decision cannot be adopted because it is in contradiction to the existing legal norms, this would eliminate or reduce the number of legal mistakes. And transparency is another issue that the technology would help to address. Certainly, the rulings are publicly available, but nobody's able to read them. We have commercial tools that are meant for legal analysis, and those decisions are quite controversial. The legal community is quite happy with them because they are able to analyze various legal decisions. If we take cassation applications, and if none of the parties to the complaint lodge a complaint with the court, whose interest is violated at that point? And there are a number of these cassation rulings. With the help of technologies, we would be able to do that, to determine that. So an algorithm would help to do that. It can be taught and show you the discrepancies in the decisions. It would be able to reference to certain precedents and the legal practice. I'm sure that such a situation is not satisfactory because it shows that in some cases we can speak of some premeditated decisions that are in contradiction to a precedent or a legal practice. So if we use certain models, they would serve as a security guarantee, helping to avoid certain legal mistakes, because such models would be analyzing the texts and would ensure speedier making of the rulings, avoiding, once again, certain mistakes. And it would not delve into interpretations, rather it would look into facts. The decisions that I referred to before were those that could not have been adopted based on the existing norms, and it took up to 3 years to repeal that ruling. It takes quite some time until the decision is repealed, and again, nobody addresses the issue of accountability for the faulty ruling that was adopted 2 to 3 years ago. And a lot of finances and resources have to be allocated for restoring the balance that was lost with the faulty decision. The entire concept of open data, the entire concept is based on the availability of open data, but we must also focus on not only processing of data, but also on the safekeeping of such data. We have a number of different public institutions that must safeguard and protect the data they're using. Using that data is necessary for receiving added value from data alone. So if this is not in contradiction with privacy requirements, we must ensure the public access to such data. A machine, however, or a model that would be able to strike different correlations between the different data sets, and it can do thousands of times speedier compared to a human being. Well, let's take a legal acts system. If we use if we want to train our machines, our models, we must ensure that the number of prompts or queries is not limited, because currently we do have certain limitations on the existing search systems with our public institutions. We know that the systems that ensuring public access to data is not without its limits. There are different structures with those data sets. There are certain limitations to the search possibilities. So if we train our machines with those data sets, we would be able to eliminate a number of different existing limitations. So in a way, we do ensure transparency, but we do limit access to publicly available data. We know that journalists and active citizens are interested in those publicly available data. So if we ensure such actual openness to data, we would ensure that the right to access to publicly available information would be fulfilled de facto. So moving on from ex post response to ex ante prevention, certainly we have to make sure that data is properly reviewed, and I've mentioned that sometimes mistakes are made. So our algorithms, our models would ensure that we avoid such mistakes. We know that when it comes to military defense, there are certain high-risk assessments that are being made, with certain major exceptions involved when it comes to national security. AI would be the one in this case that would be reviewing the data that is used. But when it comes to national security, we must be particularly cautious about the unbiasedness of the data used. How do we ensure such unbiasedness? First of all, it would be unwise for the municipalities to experiment with large language models without sharing its data with anybody else. Perhaps it would be much more convenient to use sandboxes that would be developed through different consortiums involving universities and other stakeholders. That would be one of the way out. In other words, the municipality would use a sandbox, a controlled ecosystem, without fearing of giving away some of its data. So that means that you use the data properly. There's no public access to data, but you would be able to codify the data accordingly. There are a number of technical solutions available, and this is nothing new. This is happening everywhere, but this is happening mainly where commercial use can be observed. In the medical field, again, we have a lot of data that can be used to train algorithms that can help us to identify certain information, speed up the word, conduct analysis of texts, and so on. And this is sometimes even more, this is the outcome that is sometimes even more reliable than what human beings can produce. And such models are quite precise. They are able to pass exams even better than human beings, to diagnose even better than human beings, but the final decision is in the hands of the human beings. And municipal staff has a tool that helps them to speed up their work, not only in hours, but also in days. However, the issue of responsibility must always be clear. It should be the human being that's responsible for the final decision, which certainly causes some controversy. If the analysis of the text can be verified, then that's okay. But sometimes interpretations delivered by the algorithm cannot always be verified by the human beings. What is interesting to point out that this is simply a convenient tool that will, in formal terms, say that the outcome has been verified by the human being, although you do have the duty to ensure such verification. So we just have to stress that so far nobody's intending to substitute council members or the staff of municipal council, because those tools are just there to assist you in your work. Now, as for the structurization of data, everyone will tell you that's very important to have. A good example of this could be the use of machine training, use of models for more rational catering at schools. this also hints of another issue. We lacked standardization when it comes to our legal regulation. There are certain concepts, deviating concepts that exist in our legal regulation that introduce certain difficulties in real life. So we should open our data on the principle of privacy by design. There are some data that should not be made available. However, privacy concerns are quite valid, and we must ensure that we do not violate privacy requirements when opening our data. We cannot be sure about what our machines will do in the future with our data, whether or not it will reveal private data. However, machines are able now to detect the subject of data, so we just have to change our approach. The process in general is what matters most. We must make sure that our model that is being trained with our data, that it is trained by human beings. So perhaps those that train our data must be the ones that are best equipped to work with data. So we must ensure preventive training of our models.
Operatyviom taisyklėm prieštaraujančius.
We need to understand some logical connection. What we can to ensure is our real transparency and legal quality of decisions, and then we wouldn't need separate group to check everything. Everything would be open for slicing and dicing. And I'm talking about the fact that this is not the data of municipality, it's everyone's data, and everyone in that municipality can operate that data. And what can we do now? We need to come up with a standard and adopt it. And the only way to achieve transparency is to use technology, and we should consolidate algorithmic responsibility, and it will mean that it's not the human who's going to make the decision, but the system. Can we go to formal, from formal to digitally checked? We are already doing that. Municipal institutions will have no other choice but to make that transition because they need to react swiftly. And if the data is open, it's accessible for everyone, for businesses who have commercial interests, and they have tools. And they might be used by persons who have disputes with municipalities. And it's important to be able to analyze decisions very quickly, and the private sector can do it already very well. And the state must employ high-tech measures to respond to the capabilities of our businesses. But my main message is that we should not make any artificial obstacles. We have institutions, we have people who are doing that, and it's only the matter of time when we're able to use these tools. I have a very short question for the professor. Thank you. Have you got any examples of what you described in the world? how can we ensure the prevention of the malicious use of data if the algorithm is managed by the municipality, yes, they're going to be biased. They can influence the algorithm. But if the algorithm is more centralized, the situation would be different. Biasness is virtually unavoidable. A lot of algorithms are trying to be objective, but they are grounding their decisions on certain texts that are already written. So the tool should be prepared in sandboxes, and then people in the municipality should use the already prepared tool to ensure objectiveness. And it takes up to 7 days to revise and influence a certain algorithms. If you ask, there are ways of asking certain questions in order to extract the answers that they want.
Aš matau, kad gerbiamas
I can see the professor is very well versed in algorithms. This was a very interesting presentation. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. And a round of applause for the professor. Let's move on to our discussion. And I would like to ask my colleague to introduce the discussion panelists. Mr. Martynas Katalinas, Deputy Chair of the Committee on State Administration and Local Authorities of the Lithuanian Parliament. Ms. Alicija Ščerbaitė, Vice Minister of the Interior. Mr. Vytautas Mitalas, Vice Mayor of Vilnius City Municipality. Dr. Martynas Mockus from the State Digital Solutions Agency. Dr. Giedrius Viliūnas, Vice Rector for Studies and Research from the General Jonas Žemaitis Military Academy of Lithuania. And Professor Dr. Vainius Malskis, Head of Public Administration Studies of Mykolas Romeris University. Dear colleagues, colleagues, please don't speed up. And we have 3 questions, but we have enough time to talk about each questions separately. We're going to talk about the challenges, about good practices, and finally we're going to cover recommendations on what public sector could do further. So the first question. What are the main challenges, or what are the main recent challenges of public institutions related to digitalization and AI? What are the trends? What are major risks, and what are the opportunities. So let's start by the list. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's a good question about challenges. I have worked with machine learning, which differs from AI, as we've heard in the previous presentations. But so here's an idea. Digitalization in itself does not create any value. It's the better decisions and services that create that value. Digitalization as such does not give anything. It should give the result that is felt by the citizens, because digitalization of services doesn't change anything if it doesn't change, doesn't affect the timing of the service or things like that. We have faced the fragmentation of data. We fill out our data in one system, and that data is not available in the other system, and we don't have one cohesive system of data. It would save time, it would cut the red tape. Also, there's a lack of competences, and I would like to talk about the competitiveness as the whole sector is undergoing digitalization. AI analysts, architects emerge, and the demand for them is going to increase. And the private sector is more flexible. It can offer better wages and attract better professionals. But the public sector, which is slower, faces challenges, and it needs to speed up. And there's a lack of competences in the private sector. And the third point is the speed, or rather slowness, of regulations. There's a good quote about public sector buying yesterday's technologies, and processes in public institutions of public sector buy outdated technologies that are not relevant anymore. Trust is very important, because digital solutions should be trusted by the people, and people should know that the state will use their data responsibly, and that the data will not be leaked for the private sector. And in our geopolitical environment, the topic of cybersecurity is crucial, because if data is not secure, it can be accessed by hostile states, which poses other challenges. Thank you.
Licija.
Kadangi girdėjau, Madam Vice Minister, well, since I only heard the very end of the previous speaker's speech, I can say that once within the ministry we discussed the use of DI. So I had a chance to use the AI tool, and I asked him what should I do if I made a mistake. Well, I was told that it's good that you admit that you made a mistake, and then that I should address psychologists and legal counselors about the way that I feel for that mistake that I've made. So I guess the two professions that he mentioned will still have work to do, even in the AI era. In any case, the responsibility is on the person who will be using AI in the future to make decisions. Yes, AIs can be used to process data. However, the final decision is made in the end not by AI or any other IT technologies. So I agree with the member of the Seimas who said that the public sector is facing the lack of knowledge and experience in the field. Although we do try to shape certain policy in different institutions, but at a certain point, the state will have to adopt adopt common guidelines as to how these instruments should be used in public governance. Yesterday, we had to deal with certain public procurement of certain systems, and the processes, yes, indeed, are slow compared to the development of the technology. So the state however, has to focus on many issues: data security and reliability, cybersecurity requirements, security requirements, national security requirements in general, segmentation of information into classified and non-classified information. So the state has a lot of tasks before those solutions are introduced in state institutions. But in the future, I believe this is only a matter of time before the state is able to catch up with the development of technology in those processes. Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to the Vice Mayor of Vilnius municipality, probably the most modern one in our country. Well, even for a municipality as such, there are still many challenges that we need to address. I guess we should start from the relation that we need to want to achieve with our residents. First of all, we are looking towards establishing trust between our institution and our residents. The lack of trust increases when the public sector is forced to deal with a number of different rules that is unable to abide by. In the meantime, our residents, seeing a tremendous and speedy progress in other sectors, sees that it is actually possible to address certain issues in a much simplified way, whereas the public sector is lagging behind with those solutions. Certainly, we cannot say that the public sector is working way too slow or improperly, because when talking with our colleagues from Germany, from a German municipality, they tell us that we are considerably ahead of them. However, we are talking about the rapid pace of development of technologies and rapid digitalization of processes, and we must ensure that in a way that the public sector is capable of responding to the needs of our residents in a much faster way, so that the reliability of our citizens and public government institutions increases. Fragmentation of information uneven use of data in between the different institutions, and fragmentation in the data use between the different institutions represents another challenge. The government, the previous government, made a mistake by failing to establish a chief information governance officer. I believe they will erect a mistake. I believe this is a necessary position, one that would monitor unified standards used and applied in government institutions. Thus ensuring that the opening of data, digitalization of data is done in a more speedier, more concise way by observing the state's policy. So if we're able to address those issues, I believe we will achieve quite a lot. I believe I will stop at that. Well, and now looking at one of our experts, Martinas, what do you see as our main challenges today? Thank you for the question. I would agree with Mr. Mitalas in that trust is a key aspect in this respect. As for the trends that can be currently observed in some of the neighboring countries, let's say in Denmark, when it comes to digitalization of certain solutions, certain assessment of the necessity to digitalize certain services is assessed. The UK, although it's not an EU member state, for instance, is achieving quite the opposite outcome with the digitalization of certain services, making some of the people leave the national health system for fear of their privacy being violated. Such trends have already led to the establishment of certain legal regulation. Likewise, Lithuania will have to ensure that patients addressing public institutions are able to keep their anonymity. Professor Laurinaitis has mentioned that some of the data can hardly be made anonymous without privacy being revealed. So, in order to ensure the trust of our people, we must focus on those issues. And to respond to what Mr. Mitalas has referred to on the establishment of a certain center of excellence, the State Digital Solutions Agency has definitely accumulated a number of different experts, including those coming from the fintech sector, who assist us in developing digital solutions for the state, including a GovCloud solution, that ensures the monitoring of different civil servant positions, introduction of certain digital standards. In general, I would say that we are moving in the right direction. And all of the standards that we're working on will be implemented in the end. The biggest challenge, though, is access to data. Access to data in general is quite easy to ensure. However, when it comes to quality data, that's where more problems can be observed. The quality of data will constantly be stressed in numerous different events. And the issue with that is that different stakeholder institutions have a different understanding of data and different understanding of the standardization of data. And certainly there are certain legal and organizational issues that need to be addressed. In order to make sure that the data of the classified data is not leaked. So cybersecurity is something that needs to be ensured in order to protect the data.
Stovus.
And now I would like to give the floor for the representatives of the academia, Mr. Gegužės Viliūnas. Thank you for the invitation to the conference. We spoke a lot about artificial intelligence, although the title of our conference is much broader. AI is a tool that requires data, and there's also public governance in the title of the conference, which is not only services. And when we talk about data, I'm reminded that the data needs to be translated into information and then later into knowledge and a better understanding, which would lead to better decisions. Talking about data-based governance or evidence-informed policy making. And let's come back to the question about the main challenges, and the main challenge remains the same. Evidence-based governance is struggling in Lithuania because there's a lack of will. In order to do something, one needs to have a will to do that. And the evidence-based governance is fragmented, politically marginalized, and members of the Seimas probably would not be able to tell what was the last time when they made certain decisions based on a comprehensive ex-ante AI analysis. It's done in the ministries in a formal manner, but not in the parliament. And my experience in my career shows that the challenges are dependent on the sector. And we cannot run away from those challenges. It's clear that this is a disruptive innovation, but we still haven't changed our sector. And schools, universities have to adapt to these changes. Everyone is doing something, but we have not achieved a breakthrough. Another sector, the military sector, the things that are even more radical in this case, because we need to be very proficient in the use of AI in this sector, and the Ukraine is a perfect example of mastery of AI in the military sector, and NATO and Lithuania admits that we're not ready to use AI tools in the military sector. And when it comes to the military sector, the failure to adapt and learn is a question of life and death.
Dėkoju.
Thank you. I've heard members of the Seimas talking during the intervention of Professor Smalskys. Another challenge is the competence gap between various employees of public sector in regions. A lot of employees see their skills as basic. And one of the challenges is to persuade employees of the public sector to use technology more. Another risk that's relevant for the education sector is the low-quality decisions that are based on unprecise data generated by AI using the sources that don't exist. Because we don't have a comprehensive system. Digital sovereignty is also very important, and external providers of AI models that are outside of NATO and European Union are also a challenge that should be avoided. Thank you, colleagues. Are there any reactions? No reactions. We still have 2 questions left. We can merge those 2 questions into one, but we have a limited time. So let's merge recommendations and good practices into one question. So what are the best practices in the public sector to modernize its activities in terms of AI, digitalization, and what influenced the introduction of those good practices, and how can those good practices be elaborated or used in other areas? So let's begin with Mr. Katelinas, your insights. I still have a reaction to the previously said statements. When we talk about deep analysis of the problem, and as a politician, I can say that in that case, we wouldn't need politicians. We would hire academics to analyze certain questions and come up with solutions. But it's very difficult to anticipate everything at the beginning because this is just food for thought, because ex-ante analysis could be also very expensive. As for the best practices, we could mention the tax inspectorate, registries of invoices. It tries to prevent the shadow economy, the e-identity, e-health systems that are criticized, but they're good examples of successful digitalization. And Lithuania is among the leaders when it comes to digitalization. We have a 5G network covering the entire territory of Lithuania. And as for the recommendations, I have some proposals, but I will not mention everything. But I always have this question. In health sectors, we have very long queues, and I've looked into that process in Lithuania. And a specific example, we have one outpatient clinic in Vilnius. A person is referred to a general practitioner to another doctor, and he finds out that he can register for an appointment in 3 weeks, although the same service is available in another outpatient clinic which has that doctor available. The bureaucracy prevents citizens from timely services. And digitalization could create a comprehensive system which would indicate which doctors have slots for appointments. Another example is a system related to help for families. And it was a very new system for me. And we should strive for proactive systems, systems that would offer for persons certain opportunities for help related to benefits or other services, and this could be a very good path for our state. It seems that that Lithuania lives in two parallel realities, but I would like to highlight that our population is getting older, and the use of technology is not very progressive. As a state, we put every effort to digitalize to create accessible services, but people will not necessarily use those opportunities. We should involve people so they can use the services, because we can systemize information, but if people are not using that information, that service is not useful for the society. And as for the good practices, in the Ministry of Interior, we have a police system that automates the replies for queries, and it's a very simple system requiring less human resources. Questions are grouped into certain groups, and chat robot provides answers. If the system doesn't have certain data, then we turn to interinstitutional cooperation. And this system gives a very quick result, and people who can use the system, they can get the relevant information very quickly. But there are certain gaps in the society because some people are eager to use services and information, and others just don't have the access or the competences to use those services. And as a state, we need to make sure that both groups of the people could receive the services.
Taip, savivaldos.
Thank you. Now let's turn to the municipal level, Mr. Vice Mayor. Yes, as for success stories and plans. At Vilnius municipality, we do have a digitalized solution for servicing residents. Since the municipality receives a number of different queries on a daily basis, we do use AI to categorize, so to say, those queries. We do have a chatbot available. And it enables the residents to look into the services available at the municipality. And there are a number of similar examples from all around the world, but I would just like to mention one of the examples that I liked very much, what I would like our municipality to pursue, and this relates to the field of education. I believe we do face a tremendous challenge. A lot depends from schools, but individual progress of our pupils is severely underdeveloped. We still purchase a magazine on the different ratings of different schools in the hopes that it will give us some standardized information on which school is the best for our child based on the results of standardized tests that the pupils in those schools pass, and based on the results of those tests. But if, let's say, our pupils fell ill and lag behind when it comes to their progress, then the test results are not always correct. And so we do have data pools that ensures certain trends with the performance results of individual students, enabling thus the class teachers to interfere. And if a failure is observed within that phase, then the ball is in the hands of the principal of the schools until it reaches eventually the level of the municipality. In any case, the schools face a tremendous challenge because the maturity achieved by different schools in the sense of using the data available to monitor such individual progress of pupils is different. And there are also other different tools, closed tools the use of programs that are developed on the basis of different approved concepts enable the monitoring of different needs of pupils, special needs, if there are any performance results. Since it enables an opportunity to develop specific classes for teachers should the teacher decide to follow a certain model for a class, because it is often the case that teachers face certain difficulties related with inclusive education, so such programs help them to address those challenges. To my mind, these are some of the most meaningful examples for using AI, because I believe it is truly important to ensure proper individual progress of our pupils, and it is nice to see that some of our schools do have those technologies available, making sure that schools achieve proper individual progress of their pupils. Vytautas, maybe you have some recommendations for the future, or do you stand by your recommendation of scaling up in general? Well, I would simply say that the people who are involved in developing these technologies have sent letters to experts that publicize a number of different articles asking for their assistance, and received no help from them in return, and simply best wishes for the future. So I believe so far those tools are only a matter of being an object or a pilot project of some of the people, a handful of people, a project which is a fantastic one. Martynas, what about you? How would you respond? Yes, well, I would be able to comment on the two speed Lithuanias that were mentioned by Alicia. The previously functioning committee for digital society developed a website for available digital services. What was interesting that if you were to search services related to passports, the algorithms function in a way that would offer people services related to getting a horse's passport. So it took us some time, again, to reprogram the existing software in order for it to deliver the expected results. We do have to appreciate, though, the emergence of digitalization processes in the health field, and I hope the process will improve in the future, given the state institutions acquire the necessary infrastructure. All they need now is to receive the permits from patients for certain data sharing. But I would like to mention that when it comes to open data and the use of AI, the maturity of data, the metadata that is used, and the standards that are integrated in the opening of data, I would just have to say that Based on the EU average, Lithuania is exceeding EU average, surpassed only by France in terms of digitalization achieved, which shows the maturity, technological maturity of our people, which is something to boast of. We were also able to develop a metadata agent that enables the collection of data and delivering them in a standardized way. It works with an open code, so everyone interested can report on any mistakes observed in order to improve this solution. We have already received some feedback from certain UN experts telling us that they're very much interested in the solution that we have developed. And some of the countries that are also searching for a similar solution are also referring to our model as a success story. So again, this is something that we can take pride in, because it was usually our Estonian neighbors that would always be in the lead in the field, whereas in fact Lithuania has never lagged behind. And what was perhaps missing was some strategic communication, informing everyone that we're quite successful in the field. And as for any further steps, as an institution, we are scaling up our success story. We are integrating similar solutions in order to ensure that the closed data is made open to other public institutions. And if any AI-driven services are made available, we would be able to produce data to feed those AI-driven models.
I have 3 success stories. During the COVID, there was a breakthrough. I was the head of the Strategic Government Center, and they wanted data, and the government wanted data about COVID, and it turned out that the data is provided every 3 months, whether we needed the updates every single day, and we had to compile those data sets manually, but then the state data agency created the system that was needed very shortly, and it was a very good example, and the circumstances were the ones of crisis, but we had the leadership to solve that issue. And another example related to data, it was quite impressive. One government led by Mr. Skvernelis wanted to implement reforms related to data-based decisions, and we worked towards that direction. And we had our priorities very clearly established. And looking forward, we have challenges. We have massive data sets, almost big data, and what should we do with that? And we could employ AI. In March, we started drafting the national a progress plan, and it turned out that the earmarked budget is too small, and this is an example of a decision that was not made based on data. And the third example is the long-term social study of Lithuania in the context of Lithuania 2050, carried out together with Professor Aina Ramonaitė. This is essentially a new tool, new infrastructure, strictly speaking, that will help to collect data on Lithuania's society that are lacking. If we want to solve our demographic issues, we have surveys that include the sample size of 500 people, but we can achieve a very large scale and repeated analysis, so we can have the trends and certain factors on which we could base our decisions. So the good practices and recommendations recently have been coming from Ukraine, operating in the times of crisis. It's very simple for them, but it's very difficult to achieve. They experiment a lot. They implement new solutions. They create and test new drones in 6 weeks, and then they repeat the same process with other new drones. So they're very speedy in their work. So experimentation and the scaling up is very important. We can achieve that in less dramatic environment. There's a lot of training and learning, but we should start working with AI. And every single unit, every single employee should receive tasks to use AI. Another good practice from one institution is to have an officer who is working with AI and help to solve certain practical issues. So these are the best practices I wanted to mention. Professor Smolskys, and after your remark, we're going to have our family photo taken. I have a very short remark. One of the good practices is the digital and AI training for employees. The entire public sector should ensure that their employees are familiar with the concepts of chatbot and virtual assistants, and the sharing of good practices is very important. It's important that effective AI solutions are offered for other institutions. We talk about the checking up of AI-generated results, and that is very important, and it's very important to retain our critical thinking. Thank you, Professor. 1 minute for the summing up of our panel session.
Visiems prelegentams.
Well, I will try very brief in summing up what our keynote speakers have mentioned when it comes to the challenges in the field and solutions applied. My observation would be, I'm speaking here on behalf of our committee, is that we're trying to find a way how to systematize public governance through the solutions available. Today we've already heard that Vilnius City is trying to introduce certain solutions within its institution. So I would say that those solutions are being introduced at the municipal, state, national level. So for us as a committee of the parliament, and for us as representatives of the legislature, we would like to see the actions proposed for us to undertake in order to make sure that the systems that are being introduced, that they work safely and effectively. So my thanks goes to all the keynote speakers for their insights shared today. And now we would like to invite everyone for a family picture. And then we will